Dubious ones, welcome back to This Week in Wrestling. Now, we had a huge week in wrestling, so let's get straight into the news. First off, this is going to be a little bit of breaking news that just happened as I was going to record this video. So, spoiler alert, if you don't want the spoilers on what's happened at TNA Snake Eyes, recorded on Sunday today, January the 14th, please fast forward about 30 seconds now. Now, on to the news. We got the massive return of Kazuchika Okada to TNA. This was not part of the Hard to Kill pay-per-view. This was from the Snake Eyes event that took place today on Sunday, January 14th, which I'm assuming is going to be airing on their TV tapings this week. So this is huge news for TNA here. As you can see, Okada making his entrance back into TNA to the delight of the fans in Las Vegas there. This is a huge moment for TNA wrestling. And really, this whole past week and the past couple weeks have been huge for both TNA and for New Japan Pro Wrestling, making a massive resurgence. So I couldn't be more for it. Now, as far as the rest of this week in wrestling, we cannot start without addressing the elephant in the room that was Tony Khan this week on Twitter. Tony Khan has, well, I can't say he's lost it. Controversy creates cash. But as we saw here this week, I mean, it was shocking to see just what Tony Khan, I don't know what his thought pattern is behind this. But as far as, we can't go without addressing this elephant in the room here. As for some reason, Tony Khan felt the need to defend his choice in booking Hook versus Joe for the AEW World title, and for some reason compared to Jinder Mahal having his world title match with Seth Rollins. So let's just get straight into the tweets here. A double standard. Hook has a 28-1 current record on a winning streak, calls out the champ. A logical challenge sparks online outrage. Jinder has literally lost every single match he's been in for the past year and immediately gets a title shot. Where is the rage? Well, first of all, as a lapsed WWE fan, I didn't know this. I just saw The Rock have a segment with Jinder that gave Jinder some back and forth, and now they're putting him in a title match, trying to hype up Jinder. I had no problem with it, but again, I'm a lapsed fan from WWE, so saying it didn't bother me. But what got him triggered was when the USA Network commented to the Raj Giri what was the cage match rating, when Raj Giri was just simply talking about how Jinder had history with Seth Rollins all the way back from their NXT days, when I believe Jinder took the title off of Seth Rollins, the NXT title off Seth Rollins. Correct me if I'm wrong. They at least had a match. I think it was Jinder taking the title off Seth. Either way, it was for the NXT title. And USA Network, for whatever reason, whoever's in charge of their Twitter, follows wrestling and just thought they'd throw out there, what was the cage match rating, knowing that this would trigger Tony Khan. So Tony Khan immediately went on to saying, a moral victory for USA is one win more than their world title challenger Jinder Mahal has in the past 364 days, because it's literally been a full year since he's won a match. You really put AEW in our place, getting Jinder Mahal in a big match on your TV show. Do it more often. Not a great look for Tony Khan. He makes some valid points, sure, but this is wrestling. It's all predetermined. Who cares if Hook has a 28-1 record? It's a matter of the way you tell the stories. Then we got points like where guys like Eric Bischoff chiming in. Everybody was chiming in on Twitter. Eric Bischoff just putting up a clown emoji. Tony Khan responding of, get out of my sight, you miserable has-been. This was just going crazy. And Eric Bischoff pointing out the fact that Abaddon hadn't been on TV in forever. She hadn't really won any matches in a very long time to my recollection. And then she got into a four-way match with contenders to get a shot at the TBS Championship against Julia Hart. And he felt the need to respond to Eric Bischoff. No, it's not true at all. Abaddon returned, won this match for a TNT title shot, or on TNT for a TBS title shot. Which is completely different than someone going a full year losing every match and they're in and then getting a title shot without a single win. I mean, it was literally the same thing. You put her in a four-way match for number one contenders. We hadn't seen her on TV in ages. I mean, come on. anyways, it's just crazy. He went off. He couldn't stop going on about it, responding to everybody on Twitter. Bit of a meltdown, but again, controversy creates cash. If it gets more eyes on the AEW product, then hopefully it works out for him. Anyways, in other news, we had some big pay-per-views outside of the WWE and AEW sphere realm that was in TNA's aptly named pay-per-view Hard to Kill and New Japan Pro Wrestling's Battle in the Valley. So let's get to the biggest news coming out of both events. First, we see the boy, the myth, the legend, Jack Perry, of all people, showing up in a mask here. He showed up in a mask, coming out of the crowd as a fan. Security was pulling off. He started beating up Shota Umino at the show. We got a devastating boom. Gave him a beautiful, devastating knee to the face, as well as we got to see Jack Perry ripping up, taking out his AEW contract and ripping that up on New Japan programming. So take that for what you will, if this is just storyline for AEW or what it is. To me, it's all storyline, but this was big news from the weekend and a big showing, as we have not seen Jack Perry since he got into that physical altercation with CM Punk at All In, which coincidentally resulted in CM Punk being fired from the company, and Jack Perry has been on sabbatical ever since. So a big return with a big beard. I'm a fan of the look. I'm a fan of the beard. I think he looks great. I think some time in New Japan Pro Wrestling, building up his name over there, I think would do good things for him. And if we were to see him show up in Impact, in TNA, before returning to AEW, I think would be nothing but good things for him. Now, we also saw some returns at New Japan as well. We saw the return of Matt Riddle. He is back. The Chosen Bros reunited in San Jose as Matt Riddle made his New Japan Pro Wrestling debut. Now, we also got a former WWE debut on New Japan this past week. We saw Mustafa Ali. We saw him show up and announce his intentions to face Hiromu Takahashi at the Wintrust Arena in Chicago, Illinois. So that is big news, big returns here, as he's going to be headed there to his hometown. If you're not familiar, Mustafa Ali is, I believe, from Chicago, Illinois, and he will be at the Windy City Riot on April 12th to face Hiromu Takahashi. So big signings, again, for New Japan Pro Wrestling. Big news for New Japan and TNA coming out of this week. Now, all the news from this weekend wasn't only taken up from New Japan Pro Wrestling, as I mentioned. There's been some huge news coming out of TNA's pay-per-view Hard to Kill. Obviously, we got the big news just today that we had breaking of Okada making his return to TNA. But this past week, we got some huge stuff, as we likely saw the departure of one former WWE superstar, as well as the debut of another former WWE superstar at Hard to Kill. So firstly, we got to see Trinity, formerly known in WWE as Naomi's, likely her last match with the company, as she finally dropped the TNA Knockouts Championship to Jordynne Grace. All news is pointing to her coming back to WWE. My guess, likely returning at the Royal Rumble. But it was an incredible match if you didn't see it. Really impressive muscle buster we got to see from Jordynne Grace on Trinity. This was not the end of the match, but I mean, doing it looks as good, if not even better, than Joe does it. Like, it was a really great match. If you hadn't had a chance to check it out this week, I would definitely recommend it. And then on the opposite side of us seeing likely Trinity Fatu's final match in TNA, we saw the big debut of none other than Nick Nemeth. We saw him debut in New Japan Pro Wrestling last week. This week, we're seeing him make his TNA debut at the end of the TNA World Title match between Alex Shelley and Moose. Moose having defeated Alex Shelley. Nick Nemeth coming out at the end, ripping off the shirt Hulk Hogan style, revealing the TNA shirt, as you can see, signed to TNA Wrestling. So, big signings for TNA. Now, elsewhere in wrestling, we did have a few stories this week in the world of AEW. As usual, we had some incredible matches take place, And as usual, any match that involves the name Darby Allin or Sammy Guevara requires that they nearly kill themselves in some way, and in this week was no different. First, let's quickly take a look at Sammy Guevara as he took this insane Shane McMahon-esque style bump off the scaffolding, absolutely insane, from his tag team title match against Big Bill and Ricky Starks with Chris Jericho. Just look quickly at this insanity. Oh my goodness. That made me flinch. It made me cringe. That was the end of the matchup. Spoiler alert. But that bump from Sammy Guevara, no need, no reason to take such a massive bump. The man absolutely does not need to be taking bumps like this, but he is one of the craziest bump takers in all of AEW, and I guess he just really needed to remind us of that. Now, finally, in other AEW stories, which you would have thought would have been one of the biggest this past week on Dynamite, it looks like we finally got an answer as to who Sting will face in his retirement match. And that is Spy versus Spy, the two Bond villains themselves. The Young Bucks have returned to answer the call as to who Sting will be facing in his final retirement match. Now, if you didn't see, Darby Allin and Sting had a match against Powerhouse Hobbs and Takeshita from the family, not the Heenan family, but the Don Callis family. Sting taking a ridiculous bump here, as you can see on Twitter here, took a ridiculous Scorpion death drop, blinded, not seeing where they're going to land on the table there. At his age, taking bumps like that, absolutely crazy. So am I excited to see the Young Bucks against Sting and Darby Allin in Sting's retirement match? I mean, is it who I expected to see him in his retirement match? Would I have liked to see someone else? It doesn't really matter, because Sting made this choice. Sting obviously had the choice of whoever he wanted for his retirement match. He made the choice to pick the Young Bucks. He wants a tag match with Darby Allin. That's great. That's very fitting. As far as tag team opponents, if you weren't going to go do a singles program with Darby, or maybe an Adam Copeland or something else, or some other big name that they could have brought in, Goldberg was talked about, obviously, and among other people. But I think for Sting, if he wants to have the best match as he's going out, there's a reason he picked the Young Bucks. There's a reason they're coming back looking like Bond villains. Like, I don't know, some people were giving hate on Twitter. I thought this was absolutely hilarious, the way they looked on Dynamite. I thought it was crazy. But I think they're going to give them the best match. You have three of the fastest workers, the most high-octane performers in the company, in the Young Bucks and Darby Allin. So I think between the four of them, they're going to be able to, those three guys are really going to be able to carry Sting to a very serviceable, a very impressive final match. I think Sting wants to go out having, a memorable retirement match. And at his age, I think this is what he thought is going to be the best way to do it. So you know what? I'm all for it. Good for Sting. Picking his boys on his way out with what he says is his favorite tag partner of all time in Darby Allin. So I look forward to the match regardless. Now, and in closing for this week in wrestling for this week, I'd just to give my matches of the week that I would recommend you go and check out. I'm going to give honorable mentions to Trinity and Jordan Grace from TNA Hard to Kill, as that was a hell of a TNA Knockouts title match. For Trinity to end her time in TNA, I think that was a great match to hang her hat on. And as well as honorable mentions to the street fight between Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, Big Bill, and Ricky Starks from this past week's AEW Collision. Especially because of that massive bump that we showed you that Sammy took at the end of the match. But I'm going to have to give my match of the week for this week to the triple threat match we saw from TNA Hard to Kill between El Hijo del Vikingo, Kushida, and Chris Sabin for the X Division title. Those guys were working at 100 miles an hour for the entire match, and it was very much reminded me of some of the classic X Division title matches we would see between guys like Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles, and Low-Ki. It really brought me back to the days of when I was a fan of TNA, back in their inception and in the early 2010s. It was a really incredible match, so if you haven't already, go and check that out. And if you've made it this far, leave me a comment down below and tell me what you thought your match of the week was, and what you thought the most shocking news of this week was. Was it Okada returning to TNA? What was your biggest news story of the week? Now, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And dubious ones, I'm Mr. Dubs, and this was This Week in Wrestling. Peace.